Let me encourage you in light of today's extended lockdown news. I want you to remember that for us as God's people, nothing has changed. We're still the freest people even in lockdown because of the gospel. We've been freed from a fear of an unknown future because the Lord is our King and Redeemer. He remains King and Redeemer. We're safe in His hands, and He is still working out His good purposes for us, for His glory and our city. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 to 39 reminds us that God is working for our greatest good, even in the circumstances we find ourselves in. He is growing us to be more like Jesus, His Son, even right now. The circumstances are not restricting us. They are the means God is using to grow us, to grow you in Christ-likeness as a parent, as a husband, as a wife, as a son, as a daughter, as a worker, as a student. There in Romans 8, we're also reminded that God is for us. Our future is safe in His hands because of the death and the resurrection of Jesus, our Redeemer. The death of Jesus reminds us that we are loved forever. And the resurrection of Jesus reminds us that we are safe forever, whatever the circumstances. There is freedom even in lockdown for the people of God. Remember that. We've also been freed from sin and the desires of our self-centered human nature. We're no longer enslaved to anger and fits of rage and impatience or self-centeredness and everything that rears its ugly head when we are pressured and when we are tempted in lockdown. And we are free by the power of the Spirit of God to overflow in love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control in all our relationships. Galatians chapter 5, verse 16 to 32 reminds us that Jesus has secured our freedom from sin. And He's also secured freedom from the sinful desires. Paul writes in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, at the cross, he says, I've been crucified with Jesus, and therefore I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and died for me. See, we've been freed from the power of sin. And as people who are now free, we are to use our freedom, not for ourselves, but to serve one another in love. That's what Paul says. The gospel makes us the freest people, even in lockdown. So don't let lockdown stop you from living out the freedom God has secured for you. Nothing should stop you overflowing the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. Nothing should stop you overflowing the fruit of the Spirit, love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control. Nothing should stop you overflowing the fruit of the Spirit in all your relationships, in all your circumstances, in everything you do in the coming weeks. There is freedom even in lockdown for the people of God. Maybe in the coming weeks, each week you could look at overflowing each of the 9 fruit of the Spirit. There are 9 of them. Right? Each week, think, how can I overflow the fruit of the Spirit? And there are 9 of them. Lockdown isn't going to stop you from doing that. There is freedom to love someone, isn't there? There is freedom to express joy in your circumstances, isn't there? There's freedom to pursue peace when you're anxious. There is freedom to practice patience in your family. There's freedom to reach out to someone in kindness. There's freedom to do good, to find ways to do good. There's freedom to act faithfully. There's freedom to be gentle with someone. There is freedom to be self-controlled when you are under pressure. Remember that you are free despite lockdown, despite the curfew, despite the restrictions. So church, I do want to encourage you. Use your freedom well as God's people. 1 a week over the next 9 weeks. We are the freest people, even in lockdown, because of the gospel. Lastly, don't forget, we're getting together as a church community this weekend, this Saturday, for a time of prayer. Saturday 21st, 8 to 9:30 in the evening. It's what we need, and it's what our city most needs. God's mercy and provision, God's strength and God's power. So why don't you join us this weekend as we come as a church community, expressing our dependence on God together. You can join us on Zoom at 8 p.m. at gracepoint.org.au/go/gracepointprayer. Right? That's gracepoint.org.au/go/gracepointprayer. I hope to see you there. And remember, as the people of God, we are most free, even in lockdown, because of the gospel. Remember that.